Okay, so here we are for part two with Lee Campbell. So go ahead, Lee. Let's keep going.
All right. I think when we left off, Mike, I was at Camp Drake in Tokyo, Japan, and had surgery on my arm. And so I was having therapies there. I had physical therapy in the morning and occupational therapy in the afternoon, but I didn't have a lot to do besides that. And a couple of days into therapy, a sergeant came around there in the ward I was in looking for volunteers. And so you learn in the Army not to volunteer for anything because they'll draft you. So, but anyway, I volunteered for this clerk job in one of the offices there at Camp Drake, and worked there for about 3 weeks as a clerk, doing a lot of typing for them and filing and just different office jobs. And so anyway, I did that for about 3 weeks there, and a couple of days before I went back to Vietnam, I got my orders, and so I go in and talk to the sergeant there, and he kind of liked me, and so I said, look, I've got my orders to go back to Vietnam in a couple of days, and just letting you know that I won't be here anymore after that. And he said, well, once you get back, they're going to send you right back to the field and back to your unit. And I said, yeah, I realize that. And he said, I can get your MOS changed if you would like. Well, MOS, that's military occupational specialty. So I was an 11B, which is 11 Bravo, ground pounder, infantry, whatever. So anyway, this sergeant was able to get my MOS changed to 71B, clerk typist. So I spent a couple more days there. Then the next thing I know, I'm on a plane back to Vietnam. And so I go to the headquarters there, and we were in what we called tent city at the time. I mean, just the whole base camp was pretty much tents, but they were starting to build these buildings and barracks and whatnot on concrete slabs and wooden buildings. But anyway, the headquarters were still in a tent at that time. So I go in, and so the guy there says, okay, Campbell, get your gear together. We'll get you on the first flight out. Your unit's in the field. And so I said, wait a minute, I've got these orders. I'm a 71B now. And so I handed him these orders, and he looks them over and said, well, let's see here. Okay, why don't you go down to Brigade S1, and the clerk there is getting ready to rotate out, and you can replace him. So anyway, I go down into Brigade S1, and it's still in a tent at the time. And Major Edward Kelly was the Brigade S1. I mean the Brigade S1 at that time, and he had a sergeant who worked for him, and then I was the clerk. So I did that for a month or two, and the next thing you know, we were ready to move into this new brigade headquarters building. So we move into the brigade headquarters building, and I've got pretty much a desk there and a regular job. And then Major Kelly, he becomes the battalion XO, and he's replaced by a guy by the name of Major John Musser. So now I'm a clerk for Major Musser, and also a Jeep driver. And I perform guard duty and a few things like that. And about a month or so after we got there, then that sergeant rotated out and went back home, and his replacement was Sergeant McHenry. Sergeant McHenry was the guy who was my squad leader, who was wounded when I was wounded. So there he becomes he becomes a sergeant in charge of that office. And so obviously we have a lot to talk about and all that. And then Sergeant McHenry rotated out probably a month or two before Tet happened. But shortly after we moved into the headquarters building, then we moved out of the tents and into the new, what I call the wooden barracks. It was a 2-story barracks, on a concrete slab. I was on the second floor of that barracks. There were no windows, just a staircase on both sides. And in the back was a bunker, a sandbag bunker that you could take cover in case of mortar attack or rocket attack or whatever. So anyway, life at the BMB Brigade Main Base was certainly a whole lot different than what I'd been used to in the field. So we had 3 hot meals a day. We had all the water we could drink. We had a shower building. It's probably about a 12 by 16 wooden building. It had about probably maybe 5 or 6 shower heads. And of course, it had these big, there was no plumbing there, so it had these big water tanks on the top. And if it was the right time of day with the sun hitting that, you could get actually a lukewarm shower. So when I was in the field, I think I told you about once a month was about all that we would get a shower and change of clothes and that sort of thing. But back in the base camp, you could take a shower every day. And I had a fairly regular job there. But also one of the other amenities was a 4-seater outhouse. So compared to squatting in the field, that was pretty much heaven. But of course, there was no plumbing there either. And what they did was take 55-gallon drums and cut them in half, and they would put them up to catch the waste. And then the waste would be taken out and some chemical or something put on it and set fire to, and those were always burning all over the base camp, and it was just a unique smell that you couldn't smell anywhere else. But that was commonly referred to as shit detail. So the guys who screwed up got put on ship, is actually ship burning detail. So that was something that you didn't really want to do. But I had it fairly easy, just a regular job and whatnot. And then with about 5 weeks left in country, Tet happened. And so the Tet Offensive, it was an attack by the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong all over South Vietnam. And they attacked cities and towns and military bases all over the South. So, and that happened on 31 January of 1968. And like I say, I had 5 weeks left in country, and I'm beginning to think that I'm going to make it home now. And when that happened, but their objective at the 199th was to overrun our base camp, resupply, and take our equipment and whatnot, and then move on into Saigon. We were about 20 miles north of Saigon, and part of our mission was the protection of Saigon, which was the capital of South Vietnam. So anyway, we had been on alert. Some of the officers had gotten wind of this, and we had been on alert for like 24 hours before this happened. And being in the brigade headquarters building, it was a rectangular building there again on a concrete slab. And so the 4 corners of that building, we were told to dig in and sandbag and make a perimeter. And they told us that we were the last line of defense. So I'm not sure what that meant, but there was only about 12 of us there. So if they got that far, I'm not sure what we could have done. Maybe slowed them up for 5 minutes or whatever. But we had machine guns and we had our M16s and all that on the 4 corners. And this administration building was protected by a covered walkway to what we call the TOC building. And I believe that's Tactical Operations Command or something like that building. And that's where everything was coordinated in that building. And you had to have a secret or top secret clearance to get into that building. I did not have that. I had a confidential clearance. So I could not go into that building, but it was heavily sandbagged. I mean, like 4 or 5 deep, 4 or 5 high on the top, with just a window to kind of look out around, a narrow window that they could peer out of. And so anyway, we're on alert, and it's in the early morning hours of January 31st, and it's still dark, and it's also in the dry season. So dust is just piled up. And of course, all these roads are dirt roads and whatnot within the base camp. But anyway, it's about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And of course, it's dark. And all of a sudden, it just gets daylight. So, I mean, obviously it's alarming. And so you're just looking around and what in the world is going on for about maybe 4 or 5 seconds. And then the shock wave hit. And what had happened was a Vietnamese worker had sabotaged and blown himself up inside the ammo dump in Long Bend, which was maybe 10 miles away. And it was such a terrific explosion. But when the shock wave hit, all that dust that had built up, if you remember, I told you had a rainy season and a dry season in Vietnam, and each lasted about 6 months. So that dust went into the air, and you really couldn't see your hand in front of your face. I mean, and people were out of the S1 building there, or the administration building. They were running in and out of the top building, everybody trying to figure out what had gone on and what was happening. And so anyway, by about the time they'd figured out what happened, then the attacks started on the base, on the brigade perimeter. And that went on for probably 4 or 5 days, but most of it was in the first and second day. And word around the base camp was that there was 1,000 Viet Cong dead on our perimeter. And I found out later on that the official number was actually 900 and something. So somebody must have kind of known what was going on. But this was primarily the Viet Cong planning to overrun our base camp and move on to Saigon. So after a few days, these bodies started stinking, smelling and whatnot. So they took dozers, and they dug big trenches and had pushed these bodies in there and had mass burials. So that was quite a shock with 5 weeks left in countries. For about the first week or so after that, I slept in the bunker behind the barracks. Just a tin roof on the barracks, and I was on the second floor, so I was afraid of a mortar or rocket attack or whatever. But after about a week or so, then I moved back into the building there. But one of the things, they had a club there at the base camp, and I think it might have been open maybe Friday and Saturday nights, and a couple of times a month I went there, and there was a Vietnamese girl waitress there, kind of a cute little girl. And so I went, and we just kind of became friends, and I would talk to her some and whatnot. And they would sometimes have a Vietnamese band come in playing American music or whatever. But anyway, we were just kind of friends when I would go there, and she would talk to me and I would talk to her and whatnot. So we get down to processing out for me to go home, and about 30 days, with about 30 days left in country, you get this clearance list, and you have to go around and turn in certain things, and you have to get a clearance from all these things in order to be sent back, to the States. So I had out processed and ready to go, got everything ready to go. And I'm sitting on my bunk, and my bunk was a like a twin size bunk bed, and had a mosquito net over it, and I had a locker. So anyway, I'm sitting on my bunk, got my duffel bag, and I'm packing up. And so in walks this Vietnamese girl, and I can't remember. I think her name was Kim, but I'm not really sure. So she comes walking in, and she has this painting that she has done, and she wants to give me this painting that she did. And on the back of it, it's just like a piece of plywood. I don't know if you can see that very well or not, but it's a piece of scrap plywood that she's taken and done this beautiful painting on. And the Vietnamese, all the Vietnamese just had a knack of taking nothing and making something out of it. But anyway, she gives me this painting that I brought home, and she actually wants to either go home with me or for me to send for her. And there was, other than us talking at the club, there was absolutely nothing going on between us, but those people were just desperate to get out. So anyway, obviously I told her I couldn't do that, and it made me feel terrible, but I just couldn't do that. But so when Sergeant McHenry left in the at Brigade S1, then his replacement, I can't remember his name, was just another sergeant. But the sergeant had been at the 90th Replacement Battalion, and that's where everybody coming into South Vietnam went in. And when you left South Vietnam, you went back there to be, so you were in process there and signed to your unit, and then you were out process to get ready to fly back to the States. And so this sergeant had worked there, and he said, Campbell said, I know somebody over to 90th Replacement, and gave me his name and said, you just look this guy up when you get over there, and said, I'll give him a call and let him know to expect you. So I went to the 90th Replacement, and I looked this guy up, and he takes all my paperwork and totally out processes for me. And guys were spending like all day in all these lines and everything, getting ready to go home. And he said, just hang out here in the barracks and whatnot. I'll take care of everything. And we went to dinner and spent the night there in his barracks. And the next morning, we go down in his Jeep truck or whatever to Benoit Air Base. And I'm still worried about taking sniper fire or something and getting killed on my way to Benoit Air Base. So I'm kind of hunkering down in the Jeep, and of course he kind of thinks that's funny. But anyway, we get to the air base, and then he goes in, and he's kind of the coordinator of these flights coming in. And I sit there maybe an hour or so, and the plane lands, and all the guys that are coming into Vietnam are getting off. And of course, it's March of 1968, and they're all very white skinned and whatnot, because it's been mostly been winter, and we're all this hot sun all the time. We're all dark tanned and whatnot, but they all get off, and this guy had gotten me boarding pass number 2, and I'm just a Spec 5, and it's boarding pass number 2 behind this lieutenant colonel. So I'm the second guy on the plane behind this lieutenant colonel. So anyway, we get there, and nobody's saying a word. And so finally we take off, and climb, the plane climbs up, and just we get out of artillery range, and all of a sudden this spontaneous roar, it just erupts on the plane. And it really was one of the happiest, I guess, moments, of my life, and still is kind of. But so anyway, we're kind of home free now, and so we fly on into to Oakland Army Base, and And then, but once we went to the airport there in San Francisco to go home, then I didn't experience, nobody spit on me or called me a baby killer or any of that some of the guys went through. But so I go on home, and so of course my family is anxious to see me and whatnot, but pretty much nobody asked about Vietnam, or there wasn't any thank yous. There was no parades. There was nothing like that. So anyway, I had 6 months left in the service, and I was assigned after Vietnam. I was assigned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So obviously I was a clerk now and an E5, and so I spent about 4 months at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, as a clerk, and I found out that you could get an early out to go back to school. And if you remember, I was drafted between my junior and senior year. Of course, I wanted to go back to school, and I had always wanted to be a pro golfer. So, and I was on the college golf team and whatnot. So, but anyway, I had it pretty much made there. I had my own room, and we were in a new brick barracks and all that sort of thing. So I found out about this possibility of getting an early out to go back to college. So I called up the golf coach, and I said, "Hey, Coach Morrison, what about my scholarship?" I said, "I've got 1 year remaining. Are you interested in taking me back on the golf team or whatever?" And he said, "Sure, absolutely." And anyway, I got all of the paperwork done and all that, and I got a 2 months early out. It was around middle or end of July of 1968 to go back to school. So the first quarter, this is like the second summer quarter, and I'm back in school, and I'm just happy to be out of the Army and all this stuff. And I do really well. I'm not taking a full load, but I made like a 3.5 or something, which was unheard of for me. Around the 2 point was what I was struggling to do most of the time. So anyway, and I was working part-time at Johnson City Country Club here in town as a part-time assistant pro. And so anyway, I'm doing pretty good in that first quarter, and then we get into the second quarter, and about that time I met my wife, my now wife, Ann, and we're dating a lot, and I'm working, and got a full load now. I'm going to school, and so I'm getting in class, and I'm sitting there, and I find out that I'm having a hard time concentrating, and I'm getting these sometimes flashbacks, and then other times just my mind was wandering, just wondering about different things. And then I'm trying to pay attention. 2 or 3 of the classes of stuff I wasn't really interested in, just finishing up things that I needed, to finish my degree. And so anyway, I'm starting to get behind, and my wife and I we're dating almost every night, and I'm working after school and whatnot. So I'm not doing well, and it's about the middle of the quarter, and so I'm thinking all this time, I'm thinking that I've lost 2 years toward my career. The Army has taken 2 years away from me. I'm really falling behind. So I think I just need to maybe drop out, take some night classes along, get started with my career, and do it that way. So I go to the Dean of Men and here at ETSU, and so I tell him my story. I said, "Look, I've been in Vietnam, and I've been in the Army, and I want to finish my degree, but I feel like I'm behind on my career. I had a potential job offer at that time, and I said, I really just want to get started. I want to finish my degree. I want to take some night classes and do that along, and I can do that in a few years." And I said, "But I'm past the drop and add." And so I said, "What I'd really just like to do is just drop these courses so that they don't go on my record and then pick up a little bit later." So he said, well, Mr. Campbell, you can drop out if you want to. Your classes will be incomplete for 6 weeks and then they'll turn to Fs. And so anyway, I dropped out. So, and that's what happened. So I never was able to finish my degree because then, I mean, that added 2 or 3 more years onto how long it would have taken me just to get the Fs off my record. So I found out later that, and I didn't really realize it at the time, that I feel like he was a sympathizer with the anti-war movement and whatnot, and as a lot were. But so anyway, I went on with I took a job, started my golf career. I was a PGA professional for the better part of 40 years. After I took my first job, my wife and I got married about 2 years later. And pretty much from that point on, for about 47 years, I pretty much did nothing in regards to Vietnam. I just buried it, and just like some of the guys said, just tried to forget the hell of Vietnam and just went on with my career and pretty much did nothing. The first thing that happened was during the Gulf War, which was in the early 90s, was the first time that people began to ask me a little bit about what was going on there, about what I did and that sort of thing. And that was also the time that I got the first "thank you for your service." And I remember the guy who did it. And it was just so strange feeling that, but from that point, that was early 90s. I still didn't do much beyond that. And I retired from the golf business in 2007. And I had a college buddy of mine who was also in the golf business, and he retired in 2008. His name was Gene Samborski. And he and I reconnected about that time. And of course, Gene and I had ETSU college golf team. We both worked at Johnson City Country Club for the same guy. We had PGA golf professional careers. We both married girls from Johnson City. So we got all this stuff in common. So anyway, after Gene retired, then he would be back in Johnson City, maybe a couple of times a year because his wife's parents were here and different things. And we would get together for breakfast. And these breakfast meetings would last 4 or 5 hours. And so Gene and I we had all this stuff in common, but found out that our meetings were pretty much dominated by talking about Vietnam. And we had all this stuff in common, but he'd just talk and I would talk, and they would just go on and on and on. So then the meeting would be over, and pretty much did nothing until the next meeting. But then as time went along, I found after the meeting, I would be just really excited and just whatever. But like I say, pretty much nothing went on. And during all those 47 years, I probably didn't talk about Vietnam more than a dozen times, in all those years. But so we continued to have those meetings. And so I believe it was in either late 2014 or early 2015, there was a documentary that came on. I think it might have been CNN or something, and they were advertising it for about a week, and it was Vietnam in HD or high definition or whatever. So I thought, I'm going to watch that, and I'm just going to jot down some things, some facts and whatnot that I can take the next time I see Gene, and we can talk about it, because in between our meetings, I still didn't do anything. So I got into watching this documentary, and it was, I don't know, it may have been 2 or 3 days or whatever, 2 or 3 parts. And I started jotting down some facts and whatnot. Well, that got me interested in, so I put about a page together, and then I start researching these history websites and documentaries and whatnot. And I actually wrote this kind of essay, about 20 pages typewritten essay over about 6 months of just about Vietnam. And so I started getting more and more interested in this. And so then when I became interested in it, then my wife and my daughter, when I became interested, they became interested in finding out more about what I did in Vietnam and in the Army and whatnot. And so it just, from there, I decided that I would get my medals and whatnot from the Army out of the cedar chest. And and do the shadow box for my daughter, to pass along to my daughter. So when I went through those, I found I had different things in there and Army stuff. And so I looked through there, and I'm missing 2 or 3 things I had earned. So I found out I could write to the National Archives and get replacement medals for medals you didn't get or lost or whatever. So I did that. I wrote to the National Archives, and it took about 6 months, but they sent me the medals. And so I put together this shadow box. If you
Wow.
can see it
Wow.
there,
Wow.
for my daughter, and just pass along to her. So I'm really getting involved in this. And so then I decided, well, wonder if I could find out more about my actual unit instead of just the Vietnam War as a whole, and some of the guys I served with. So so I start searching on the internet, and Jim Rothblatt is the first guy that I find. And the way I found Jim was he had posted a tribute to this guy Miller, who I had told you about, who was killed and was a mutual friend in Vietnam. He had posted this tribute to him. Through that, I found an email address and sent him an email, and we reconnected. And so then shortly after I was able to reconnect with Jim, I found Sergeant McHenry through the internet, through a funeral obituary for his wife. So I was able to make contact with Sergeant McHenry. Sergeant McHenry was in assisted living at that time, and through his daughter, I was able to communicate with him. I would send stuff to her, she would take it to him. I was able to talk to him a couple of times. I called him on June the 30th of 2017. And the reason I had called him was that was the 50th anniversary of the day we were wounded. So I called him, and sadly he had passed away the day before. So I didn't get to talk to him on that. But I found other guys, Robert McClamrock, he was with me on July 2nd when all that happened. Daniel Toro, found him in Puerto Rico. Email with him. He's the guy who bandaged our wounds on that day. Found our, through Jim, I found our company commander and our second platoon leader and whatnot. So I have been able to communicate with some of those guys. And anyway, that all led up. Jim and I still communicate regularly. So we decided in 2000, well, I guess it was midsummer of 2018 that we're going to try to get some of these guys together for a reunion. And we decided that maybe we'd like to go to Washington, D.C. and visit the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. So we try to get this reunion together, and as it ends up, for one reason or another, nobody ended up going, but Jim Rothblatt and I. So Jim Rothblatt's in Palm Springs, California. He flies here to Johnson City, Tennessee, East Tennessee. We drive up to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And so then we spend a day there, and we were pretty much at the memorial. We were pretty much the only two vets there. So people were coming up to us and wanting to make a picture with us and whatnot. And of course, we're there, which was emotional. But but anyway, we're there to make rubbings and whatnot, of names and all that. And Jim had been there before, and it was my first time. But one of the things that happened was this group of 8th grade middle school students were there to visit the memorial. And so they come up, and like I say, we're pretty much the only two vets there at that particular time that day. And so they would come up and, are you guys Vietnam vets? And can I get a picture made with you? And so that happened 3 or 4 or 5 times. And finally, Jim said, well, look, why don't just the whole group come up, and let's get one picture instead of all this one at a time. So this is,
hold it up. Yeah.
That's
great.
So that's Jim and I, and this Iowa middle school class.
Oh my gosh.
At the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. So anyway, that was quite emotional. But also Jim, over the years, had met and been in touch with Jan Scruggs, and I'm not sure if you know who Jan Scruggs is or not. Jan Scruggs was the founder of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the wall. Jim knew him. He had arranged for us to meet up with Jan. So we met up with Jan at his home he lived in Annapolis. He lives in Annapolis, Maryland, and so we met up with him at his home. Jan took us to the Naval Academy there and whatnot, and we had lunch with him, and turned out to be a really, really nice day. And I'm still, through Jim, I've still been able to be in contact with Jan Scruggs, and so I still get an occasional email from him. But Jim and I, and Sergeant McHenry, Toro, and all these guys, we were in Charlie Company, or C Company, 4th and the 12th, 4th Battalion, 12th Infantry, 199th Infantry Brigade in 1967. Well, Jan was in D Company, 4th and 12th, 199th in 1969. So we're in the same unit, but basically, he was a couple of years later, a different company, but Jan was, he was also wounded over there and whatnot. But so this one is Jim and Jan Scruggs and I that we took in Jan's home, and Jan's a really, really nice guy, and it's a wonderful thing that he did there with the memorial and whatnot. But I don't know if you've that pretty much is my story. I've got some short little stories too, if you want to hear any more or
I
whatever.
want
I
to hear
don't know if we
more.
got any time left or what, but
No, I want to hear more, but I have a question for you.
sure.
So you said for 47 years, you just kind of went on with your life, but of course, Vietnam had a major impact on your life. I mean, how were you able, did you really just ignore Vietnam for 47 years, or how did you deal with that?
I I just tried to bury it. I didn't have a whole lot of problems. I would have these recurring dreams,
Hmm.
but I had one in particular, and it wasn't a real combat type dream. It was just that I was back in Vietnam. I'm standing in the base camp. It's my first day back, and I'm there for another year, and I'm trying to tell everybody, wait a minute, I've already done this. I've already been here. I'm not supposed to be here. I had that dream for years, and I had a few others, um, but I just was so interested in my career, and like I say, nobody was interested for all those years, and now people are, of course, are very very interested. But I just did that. My friend Gene Samborski, the golf pro college team buddy, he had a career in golf too, and he was perfectly normal until he retired. He developed PTSD, sees a therapist, takes medication, and has a very, very hard time with it, as do a lot of people. I just was able to bury it somewhere, and then I guess that's why I'm so enthusiastic about it in the last 5 years, trying to find out all I can about it and contacting guys, and because it just was buried in there for so long, and no interest, and I just forgot about it.
And did you ever want to go back though to Vietnam? I mean, now or
No,
no?
I call what I'm doing revisiting Vietnam, but no, I don't want to go back there. I made a promise to myself if I ever got back to the States that I would never leave again. And so far I have never done that, but I have no interest in going back.
Yeah.
Jim Rothblatt went back,
Yes.
and lots of guys do it, but no, I had no interest in going back.
Not for you. Okay. All right. So tell me more of your stories. Let's hear.
They're just little things.
Yeah, please.
Uh, Jim Jim sent me these. These are sea rations.
Okay, hold them up.
Yeah,
That's what you ate, or?
that's sea rations. This happens to be crackers and cocoa. If you can see that, this is pound cake.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh, two of these together is pretty much the size of one main course meal. You would get that, and this happens to be blackberry jam,
Oh yeah.
which is not important. But what happened in the field? We were on 3-day resupply, so these things all stacked, and so all these sea rations for 3 days come out. You would go through there and pick out what you needed to keep, and stack those up and put them in a boot sock. So you would have a stack maybe this high in a boot sock and tie that onto your gear, to your pack, and carry that. That's how you carried your sea rations. And so there was also, in one of these units was fruit, and you would get either apricots or peaches or pears or fruit cocktail, I believe it was. And you always loved if you got a unit with one of those in it, because you not only could eat the fruit, but you could drink the juice. So that was something, with water being a problem and whatnot. So So you got that, you got in that little box, you would get your main course, and then you get a couple of extra things. It came with this spoon. So that's what we ate them with. You would have a little tool we called a P38 tool that you open these cans with. You get salt and pepper and sugar and some things like that in there. And for the guys who smoked, I wasn't a smoker, but you would get like a 4-pack of cigarettes. And so all in that C ration pack. Also, in most of the guys, we were all counting down days until we came home. So there were different things, but guys had these. This is a short timers calendar, and this is obviously it's a naked lady, and this one starts at 100 days. So there was something special about when you went from 100 days to 99, you were in double figures, and so you would color these things in, and starting at 100 or whatever. This is actually not not mine, but I had one of these in my locker, and so when you got down to 3 and 2 and 1. So it's a way to pass the time. And as that colored in, then you knew you were getting, we called it getting short. So guys would be 100 days short or 30 days short or whatever. So they called it getting short. You know.
What kind of all the C rations? I mean, was there one that you particularly liked, or was it all just the same?
No, beans and weenies, spaghetti and meatballs. There were different ones. I think there was about a dozen different ones. There were some you didn't like as well, but you could. They had these little heat tablets. Sometimes you could. I didn't heat it up very often. Most of the guys didn't, but sometimes they would. Sometimes they would take C4 as a plastic explosive, and guys would take C4, just a little pinch of C4, and that would, you light that up and it would heat up a can of C rations or whatnot. But like I say, the fruit was a big thing for me, because you'd have a whole can of juice that you could drink after you ate that fruit. So that was the water, wasn't very good. Do we have any time left?
Keep going.
Okay. When I got back from Vietnam, I found out my mother had cut this article out of the paper, and this is John Honecker. He was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam, and he is from the reason it was in our paper is he went through the ROTC program here at ETSU and got a commission. He was the helicopter pilot that flew the evacuations on that April 23rd firefight that I told you about. Through this article, I was able to locate John in Texas, and I still communicate with him. We've talked several times and sent him things, but just I kept this article, and you can see it's kind of old there, but so I was able to contact him. I've got one more story about back in the base camp. Lieutenant Roger Yonker was our second platoon leader when I was in the field. So most of the officers would do 6 months in the field and then 6 months assigned either back in the base camp or some other non-combat job. So Lieutenant Yonker was in charge of the Red Catcher Training Center back at the base camp. And that's where I went to, and everybody that came in went through that 5-day in-country training at the Red Catcher Training Center. And Red Catcher was kind of our nickname. So he was in charge of that. And he was my second platoon leader back when I was in the field. So I ran into him one day back at the base camp somewhere, and he invited me down to his tent. And so I go down there, and we had this connection. I played golf at ETSU, and he played baseball at Tennessee Tech, and we were both in the Ohio Valley Conference, the OVC. So we had kind of a connection there. But anyway, Lieutenant Yonker invited me down to his tent, and he had an old reel-to-reel projector with these 8mm movies. So we went down there at night after work and actually watched movies on this projector he had. And while I was in there, I noticed he had his golf clubs, set of golf clubs back in the back of the tent. And we used to have shag bags, which was just a bag full of old balls that you practice with, because a lot of courses didn't have practice ranges and whatnot. So he knew I played golf, and I knew he played baseball, and we had that connection. But he had his golf clubs, so he wanted to see me hit a golf ball because he knew I was a college golfer or whatnot. I said, here, just hit a couple of these balls. So we go across the road there at the base camp, and just kind of at the edge, and I take something there and hit 4 or 5 balls off into the thing. And you got to realize I hadn't hit a ball in maybe at that point, since I'd been in the Army, which is probably a year. I had my jungle boots on, my whatever. But anyway, I hit them pretty good, and so that's my little story about Lieutenant Yonker. But, and actually, I've been in touch with him. He actually remembered part of that story. So I've been in touch with him through email and whatnot.
So it's, I mean, it's been more than 50 years, right, since you were in Vietnam. I mean, what do you feel, in a very difficult time, right? And so, but what do you feel that, I mean, you've learned that, we should learn as a country from, yours and many other people's experience in Vietnam?
Well, obviously, as it turned out, I mean, it may have been a mistake to do that. I think we should just be more careful about what we're getting into. But when I was there, when most of the guys there, we were too young. I mean, to see the big picture, to realize what was going on. When I was there in '67, we pretty much didn't know what was going on here because the protests and all that were just heating up.
Yeah. So
when we got back home is when we were surprised. Now, some of the guys that went later on, they had already experienced that here, but we just didn't know what was going on. We just did our job, followed orders, whatever, wanted to come home. We went there because we were either drafted and had to, or we volunteered because we thought we should, our country was calling, and our fathers and grandfathers had done this. So we thought we should too.
Yeah. Well, Lee, this has been just amazing for me to hear firsthand, your experience, and your stories are just, I mean, they're great. They're just, and I think it's important to preserve the history of, what happened. And so I just want to thank you. I thank you for your service, of course, but thank you for being willing to share, with me about your time in Vietnam and then coming home. And, and it seems like you've had a very good life for yourself.
I absolutely have. And thank you, Mike, for allowing me to tell my story. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, Lee, take good care.
All right. Thank you, Mike.